Picture this: the quiet, peaceful English countryside in the 1980s. Suddenly, that peace is shattered. Two teenage girls are murdered, years apart, but in the exact same brutal way. The community is terrified, the police are hitting dead end after dead end, and a killer is just walking among them. The case seems impossible, but it all gets cracked open by a brand new science, a drunken boast in a pub, and a tiny molecule that would change crime fighting forever. Let's get into it. So, that's the big question, right? It's this incredible story where the most advanced forensic tech of the time gets completely fooled, only for the whole thing to be unraveled by a simple, very human mistake. The answer doesn't just catch a killer, it literally gives birth to a whole new era of justice. Okay, so our story kicks off in these two small English villages, Narborough and Enderby. These were the kinds of places where everybody knew each other's business and, serious crime was just something you saw on TV. That all changed in 1983 when a 15-year-old named Linda Mann was murdered. Then, 3 years later, it happened again. Another 15-year-old, Dawn Ashworth, killed in the exact same horrific way. You can just imagine the terror. This cloud of dread just settled over these villages. Parents were locking their doors, setting crazy curfews. Every man was suddenly a potential suspect. And the police? Well, they were trying everything, all the old school methods, knocking on doors, interviewing hundreds of people, but they had absolutely nothing. They were hunting a ghost. Then, out of nowhere, the police think they've got their breakthrough. They bring in a local 17-year-old kitchen worker, Richard Buckland. Now, he had some learning difficulties, and after hours and hours of really intense questioning, he confesses to one of the murders. Now, back in those days, a signed confession was everything. They called it the Queen of Proofs. Case closed, right? But something just felt off. Buckland kept denying the first murder, and police were sure it was the same killer for both. So they decide to take a massive gamble. They reach out to a local scientist, a guy named Alec Jeffreys, who was working on this totally new, totally unproven technique called genetic fingerprinting. The idea was basically that our DNA has a pattern, like a barcode, that is completely unique to each of us. And what happened next was an absolute bombshell. Jeffreys' test did two things. First, it proved the police were right. The DNA from both crime scenes was a perfect match. Same guy killed both girls. But then came the shocker. They compared that killer's DNA to Richard Buckland's, and it wasn't even close. He was innocent. This was the very first time in history that DNA evidence was used to clear a suspect, saving an innocent kid from spending his life in prison. So, the police are right back where they started, but this time they have a secret weapon. They have the killer's genetic profile, this perfect biological signature, but they have no name, no face to attach it to. So what do? They launched something the world had never seen before, a mass DNA screening. The scale of this thing was just staggering. They literally asked every single man in the area between the ages of 17 and 40 to voluntarily give a blood and saliva sample. Over 5,000 men lined up to do it. Think about the social pressure there. If you were the one guy who said no, you'd immediately become the prime suspect. So for months, the lab is working around the clock testing sample after sample after sample. And after this huge, expensive, and frankly pretty invasive operation, they found absolutely nothing, not a single match. It was like the killer had just vanished into thin air, completely beating the system. But here's the thing. He hadn't beaten the system. He cheated it. The real killer was a man named Colin Pitchfork, a local baker, a father of two, hiding in plain sight. And he had cooked up a pretty clever scheme to make himself genetically invisible. Pitchfork knew he was going to get called in, and he knew his DNA would be a match. So he goes to a coworker, a guy named Ian Kelly, and he spins this whole sob story about how he had a minor criminal record and was worried the police would try to frame him. He then convinces Kelly to go take the blood test for him, using a fake ID. And, with the police trying to process thousands of men, somehow it actually worked. The sample for Colin Pitchfork came back totally clear. For almost a year, Pitchfork thought he'd gotten away with it. I mean, he had outsmarted the most cutting-edge science on the planet. But his perfect high-tech crime was about to be undone by the oldest, most low-tech human mistake in the book, a big mouth after a few beers. So fast forward a year, and Ian, the friend who gave the fake sample, is at a pub with some coworkers. He's had a few drinks, and he starts bragging about how he helped out his buddy Colin by taking that DNA test for him. While most people just kind of laughed it off, one woman at the table went completely cold. The gears started turning, and she realized if Colin was that desperate to get out of a simple test, he was almost certainly the man the police were hunting for. She went straight to them. And that was it. The game was up. Police arrested Colin Pitchfork, took a fresh blood sample, this time under very close watch, and sent it to the lab. The result came back, a perfect, undeniable, 100% match to the DNA from both crime scenes. The arrest of the century was complete. The science had finally gotten its man. But this story doesn't end with just one killer going to jail. Not even close. What happened in this tiny English village set off a global revolution. It completely rewrote the rulebook for crime and justice. So let's take a look at the world after Pitchfork. Basically, overnight, everything changed. DNA became the new gold standard for evidence. I mean, fingerprints can be tricky, but the odds of two people having the same DNA profile are in the trillions. The whole idea of a perfect alibi was shattered. Your own body could now be a witness against you. This also created the whole concept of the cold case, because police realized they could go back and solve murders from decades ago. And the next logical step, of course, was to start building databases of all this information. And the dominoes fell fast all over the world. Just 1 year after Pitchfork was caught, the FBI opened its first DNA lab. Then countries everywhere started creating their own national databases. The science was seen as so reliable that it even helped change an 800-year-old law in the UK called double jeopardy, which said you couldn't be tried for the same crime twice. Well, now, with new DNA evidence, you could be. The legacy of this one case leads directly to where we are today, using things like forensic genealogy to solve infamous cases like the Golden State Killer. But it also leaves us with a huge question for our own time. We know for a fact that DNA is the ultimate truth teller. It's a biological witness that can't lie. The question isn't if we can read it anymore, it's who should have the power to do so.